So in this video, we are going to implement our next feature, which is to transfer money from one user to another. And this is how transfers work. So here we have the user name and which we transfer money, and then here the amount. And so we need to attach an event handler for this button. And we are going to take a look at our flowchart to see what we have to do. And now let's start to take a look at here at this element. So this is the button form, and then we will take our values from form input amount and form input to. So see that here we have debts input transfer to and input transfer amount, and to button is button transfer. So always we already selected all of these. And now let's see that write button transfer dot add event listener and then click. Now then we use the function. So we will actually need our event again. So we need to do event dot prevent default because this one is also a form. So without this, if we clicked here, then that will reload the page. So this here is a common to do anything when we are working with forms, so preventing the default behavior. So now let's create some data here based on the input data and starting with the amount. So the amount equal input transfer amount dot value, and then we need to convert it once again to a value and or a number actually. So for that give number, and now when we reload here, so we lost all the data. And so this current data that we need, so we will have to start to log in always here, and we could find a way around this. Let's keep logging in whenever we have to check. So now we have the amount, and then we also want to figure out the account to which we want to transfer. So let's write const receiver account, and now the value is input transfer to dot value. So that is the string that's going to be right here. So for example, if we want to transfer to Jessica Davis, that's going to be a JD. And now, however, debit value alone, so that username alone is not that helpful. It is only helpful when we use it to then actually find the account object to which we want to transfer. And now for that, we once again use the find method. So that's accounts. So that's the array holding all the accounts, and then we have the current account, and we want to find the account where the username is equal to this value, and that we want to put here. And so now to recap here, we are now looking for the account which has this value. So that is going to be the username value that we input into that from, so which we want to transfer. And so here we are looking for the account with the username which is equal to debits input as username, and then we select that from the account once more using the find method. And now we have this data, and so just to check if it's the correct or not by logging it all to the console. So also the receiver amount. So now let's give us JS and the pin. Now let's say I transfer to Jessica Davis, that's JD, and then I'm giving 100 euros, and then now the console we get 100. So and the account with the username that I just input it here. So great. Let's see what we have to do now. So we need to add a negative movement to the current user and add a positive movement to the receipt, and that makes sense. So if I transfer 100 to someone, I should lose that 100 in my account and the other person should receive that 100. Otherwise, we should just create new money. So we do that and then we update the UI again. So we show again the movement summary and balance because all of that will be affected by this transfer. Now, what kind of this you're missing here in this flowchart is that we also actually first need to check some stuff. So we need to check if the amount here is actually a positive number, or we also need to check if the current user, that is Jonas, now actually has enough money. So I should not be able to transfer 5,000 if I only have 3,000 here. And so implement that check first. So here give that if amount needs to be greater than 0. Otherwise, we could be a negative transfer and then basically transfer money to ourselves. So this needs to happen and also the balance to the current account needs to be greater or equal the amount. So that's we are trying to transfer. Now this balance value is actually not stored anywhere. So in this place where we calculate this balance, that is here. So calculate display balance, that all we do is to calculate it and then display it immediately on the user interface, but we do not save it anywhere. So let's actually change that. Besides only displaying it on the user interface, we also want to save it into the account. Now, how do we get access to that account means we will do the same as we did previously with this function. So where now instead of the moments we passed the entire account. So like that we will be able to read the movements and from that account, and also we will be able then to create a new property on that account with the balance. So now here we are changing it from movements, and so now we will be calling it with the entire array or entire account object. So here we need to do account dot movements, and before we move on further, let's call this correctly. So calculating display balance should now only be called the entire account object. So and not only with the movements array. And now here we take the movements from the account object and then we can add that. So we can say that dot balance equals balance, and in fact we can make this even better. Now we can store this value here immediately in account dot balance. So let's do that account dot balance here and then we get that property here from account dot balance. So, and remember why all of this works, and we have some error here, but that doesn't matter. It's something unrelated now. Anyway, let's remember why all of this works means why we can set this property here on this account object that we receive, and it will then set that right here on these objects that we have here. So the reason is that once again, all of these different references to actually point to the exact same objects in the memory heap. Okay, so when we access this second one object here, so down on this login function, so right here where we create this account, create account variable. So this is of course not really a copy of the object itself. So just as we learned before, this is simply another variable which points to the same. So to the original object in the memory heap. And so this current object, current account object again is exactly one of these objects that we have here. So one of the objects of the account array. And they are the exact same object, they simply have different name. Here it is called account 1, but then down here it might be called the current account. And then we use the current account to pass it into the calculating display balance function, And so then inside of the function, it will have even another name. So here it will be called account. So short form ACC, but still the same object. It's still pointing to the same place in the heap and now in the memory. So, and therefore setting the balance property here on account is exactly the same as setting up here. So where we first defined the objects, and I will show you that in practice in a second, but now let's go here. And so this is where this arrow comes from, because we don't have any code block and also because there is no second operand here. So anyway, let's go back to the condition. So we already defined the transfer can only happen if the amount is greater than 0. And now the second part is that current user needs to have enough money to do this transfer. And so that means current account dot balance, which is the property that we justified. And so we calculated the balance, and that needs to be at least equal to the amount that we are trying to transfer. So, and also we should not be able to transfer to your own account. So that's at the condition as well. So what we are trying to say is that receiver account dot username must be equal from the current account dot username. So now, so we should also check if the receiver's account actually exists or not. If it doesn't exist, of course, it makes no sense to transfer money there. So we could add that here like simply testing this. But instead, since we are already trying to read a property from that object here, and we can use once again optional chaining like this. And so then if this object here doesn't exist, then immediately this here will become undefined and the whole end operation will fail. So let me just comment this out, and now this should work. See. So let's just log this into console to write transfer valid. And now I will check all of these conditions. So give JS pin, and now I want to transfer again to Jessica, and I will try to transfer 0. So we get 0. See here, and we do not get transfer valid. So that means we didn't enter the if block here. So let's try to transfer more than I have. And so this is also not valid, but now 5,000. And so all of these should not be true. So you will see a transfer valid. And if I try something else, then again nothing should happen. Now, actually, it does happen. So, indeed, the receiver account is undefined. And so, this here will now be undefined. So, but I see what's happening because all that we are asking here is for this to be different current account dot username. And so, JS is of course different than undefined, and therefore this is here is still true. And so, in fact, we need to do is let's try this again. So you see, we are back to this and can happen all the time. We see, find them, we fix them and move on. Now we test the some wrong username. No, nothing happens here. Now the transfer is not valid. And now I am also trying to transfer it to myself. And so this is also not valid. But finally to Jessica, try it will be valid. So that given that its transfer is valid, and now we intended to do along so these steps that we have here. So let's do that. So the current account dot movements. So we will add one new movement. So that is here I am using push method, but here the amount is a negative. So the negative amount and now the receiver account. we will add a positive movement. Start amount. And now we already did it. That's the most important part of doing the transfer. So doing the transfer, and then we also want to update the user interface. So we could now copy this code, copy and then paste it here, but that's not good practice as you already know. And so I will not refactor this code here into one function. So let me grab this here, and this function will be called update UI, and it will also receive of course the current account. So now let me write now the function here updated UI equals function, and I'm going here to leave it empty for now. And so that here I need the current account. So otherwise I could not call this three function then using the account. But here I can call them whatever I want again. So let me just call them account. And so we refactored that functionality into its own function. And now we can call this function anywhere that we want in our code. And it will then always perform these three tasks. So here I already called it update UI. So we just write it here also as a comment. And now all I have to do is to paste it here as well. So with this, it should be working. So let's transfer to Jessica, give 500. And so now you should see that one negative movement here, and this should be decreased by a 500. And indeed, let's check now here the accounts variable just to see if we actually get the balance. So that now we have the to balance property, we also have two movements, and of course it's going to contain the minus 500. So that's the money that we just transferred away to Jessica, and now it should already be in Jessica's account. So her latest movement is now 500. So that's take ticket out also in the user interface. Now before doing that, the final thing that we are going to do is to clean these input fields. But now just to make sure, let's log into Jessica, and then we should get plus 500 here at the latest deposit or not. So here it is. And now we need to clean out these inputs, and that we will do no matter if the transfer was successful or not. So we can do that outside of this element if statement. So just right here, actually we can do it right here. Let's get rid of all these console.log, and then input transfer amount equal, or actually dot e value, that is equal input transfer to equal the empty string. And with this we should finish this. Now let's try it one more time. This time Jessica will transfer something to something, and we lost here the latest transfer of course because the page is reloaded, and this data of course then gets lost. So when our page loads the information about the account, so the accounts data will always be exactly what we have here in our code. So that's the reason why the data that 500 transfer is no longer here, but that doesn't matter. So let's transfer it to Steven, and here I'm giving 1000. And so now we get an error. See that assignment to constant variable HTML button, that line 167. And now one more time I forgot the value here, that's mistake. Let's try that again. Steven, I believe. And now it worked. So all of our statistics here were updated, and indeed now this field or both of the fields are empty. And now as we go to this account, so how apparently it does not exist. Now see here it was Steven's account, and now we get this 1000 deposit here, and that we just did previously, all right. And so our application is now working. So this is all about this transferring, implementing transfers. So this is all about the session. See you in the next one. Thank you.